All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back on the air, so we can continue. I'm sorry, Mr. Superintendent, do you want to have your staff continue?
Yes, sir. Mr. Burke, I'll turn it back over to you, Leanne.
Yes, thank you. So we were at a good intermission point there. We're ready to move into the capital budget. Ms. Evans is going to take us through that now. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. The capital budget is balanced. I want to start off, though, very briefly give you an update on the sales tax projections. I know you've seen some of this before. We're monitoring the sales tax very closely, and we have a number of projections, but the important thing, and I'll be brief, with two of our projections, one projects will be short by about 35 million. One shows we'll be short about 10 million. I'm updating this every month as data comes in. We have $47 million in the sales tax reserve. So in either scenario, we should be in good shape. This scenario that's running the closest is assuming that we're at 60% of forecast through the rest of 2020 and 2021. And then we'll revert to the forecast after that. So if we recover from the recession faster, we'll be in a better condition. If it lasts longer, we'll be worse. It's something we'll watch. Quite frankly, this is a guess. No one has a really good logic and whole forecast on this. But so far, this projection we're working on right now looks to be close. So we'll keep updating you as we have more information. So the capital budget is a group project. There's a lot of departments that work very closely with us to balance that every year. They provide all the needs, all the updated information. And we update that with revenue projections, property tax values, et cetera, to come up with a budget. And there's a couple of big enhancements this year. And the one that I know has been discussed is the increased funding for computers. I remember last year at the end of the year when we talked about the budget, how our goal was to try to bring us to one-to-one in the next update of the capital plan. And at the time, the plan was to do that over several years. Well, in the new environment we're in right now, it's become very important to make that happen. So we've juggled some things around, and so far it looks like we're going to be able to do that. There's a lot of money going to the computers this year, and it will take time to get the units. They are not all in the U.S., so they're being manufactured, but the funding is there. Purchase orders already issued, and the goal is to get the computers here as quickly as we can. There's also a significant increase for roof projects. There's a number of roofs that have leaks that we weren't expecting, so that we of course put that money in the budget, and then we've juggled everything else around to make it work. This is just a graph showing how the money is being split up at this point, and this is FY21 alone. There's a few slides I'll go through today, and I'll make sure I point them out when it's referencing the entire capital plan, but most of what we're talking about is just FY21. So this first slide is one that is the full capital plan. And I know this is something that's very important to all of you and the public. What are we planning to do for construction-wise over the next 10 years? So these are the major construction projects. And just to go over the legend, anything that's in italics was on the referendum project list. Anything in bold is new. So there's two new projects. There is the modernization of West Riviera. That is the last school scheduled to be modernized. And it was actually planned to be a little bit further out, but the beauty of doing a 10-year plan is that you can look that far out. We don't have another COPS issue planned out there, so we wanted to bring it in to do it when we're borrowing for the project. So that means we're expediting that one. We also have a project, it's a placeholder more than anything else. It's design money for a project in West Delray area, a projected K-8 elementary school. That funding is in FY30 in the last year of the capital plan. So this is the first time you've seen it. Again, we're planning 10 years out. The other changes that I wanted to point out, the Forest Hill High School addition, we delayed that last year. We can't build that addition unless we have some additional land. It's landlocked. There was money for the parking lot. We've pushed that back to coincide with the addition. You can't do one without the other, really. So we shifted that back. It's still in the plan. It's in FY26. It's just beyond the 5-year window. And if we're able to work with the city and make an arrangement to have land, we can always move that back up. But for now, it's in year 6 of the plan. And there's two projects. The Old Grove Elementary demo, that school it now belongs to the city of Belglade, so no need to spend the money on demoing that. And for Old Plumosa, we were going to demo that, and the plan was initially to land bank it and then use it for South Intensive. But now that South Intensive is being put in concretables at the old South Tech, that money is not needed at this point. So we've taken it out. It was on the referendum list, but it's not sales tax dollars. So that's one of the pieces we use to help balance the budget to fund all those computers.
Ms. Evans, Ms. Brill has a question.
Thank you. I just had to find my mic. So I have a question with regard to the Sunset Palms Middle School. Originally, from my notes, and I just looked back, from the note also from the project executive, the original plan, as we informed COBRA, was to open for the 2022-2023 school year. According to this, it's August 2023, which is a year later, and it looks like that project executive did convey that. If that's the case, we do need to, when we make changes like that, we need to let the community know. You know, I don't want to just see it. So I guess my question is that correct, 8/2023? And if so, when did we make the decision to move the date?
I can follow up with the facilities team. They provided the dates of when the schools were going to open. My understanding was it was not a change in opening dates, but we can follow up and get that back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you. And just for your, if I may follow up, Mr. Barbieri, just for your clarification, it was Jim Reinhart, the project executive, who informed the public that it was moved, or at least informed COBRA.
Okay, I'll be happy to follow up with the facilities team as once this meeting is over, and we'll get an answer back to you.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. As I was looking at the West Central or transportation for 8/2023, did we finally get that resolved? Because there were some issues with the property itself.
Hi, this is Wanda Paul, and yes, we did. So we're moving forward with that project.
Mrs. Paul, can you answer Mrs. Brill's question? Were you there? She asked a question about the time frame on Sunset Palms Middle School.
So I'm looking, I believe I spoke with Ms. Brill about this previously, and I believe I told her what the date was. I don't think it was August 23 that I told her, but I'll go back and reconfirm with my team on that one. We've not had any delays on the project. I'm looking at where the money is in terms of the project. So I'll reconnect with Ms. Brill on that and confirm again.
Thank you. Mrs. Andrews, you have another question? Go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment right now. I want to thank everyone, especially the school board and everyone else, the administration, for the old goal. For those that are on this call today, that's going to be demolished by the city of Belle Glade. Thank you for the gift to the city of Belle Glade. And that's going to be affordable housing for teachers, staff, and the community. So that's a great opportunity for the Glades region. So thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions on this list? Okay, if not, the next section is debt service, and that is a large component. That's what we use debt to pay for all the construction projects. And you all know this is one of my favorite slides. It's in every presentation. So we do have a couple of COPS issues. We'll be financing construction projects in 2021 and 2022, and then a little bit further out. There'll also be a short-term debt issue in FY21. The last one planned to finance the purchase of chillers. We've been doing a lot of air conditioning replacement projects by doing these short-term financing. They're called leases. It's more like a car loan. We just pay for it over 5 years. And this is the chart that I always refer to. The tan bars is the debt service associated with already existing debt. Blue is what we'll be adding on for the new construction projects. And the red line is 50% of 1.5 mils. That is the guidance in our debt management policy that we do not exceed that. The green line that I continue to always show, that's what it would have been if we still had 2 mils that we used to have. And I wanted to point that out this year. As we run into tough financial times, I remember this happened going from 2 mils to 1.5 at the beginning of the last Great Recession. So it's something to keep our eye on. If the legislature needs to find a way to fund operations and chooses to pull money from the capital budget like they did years ago, that line could drop down here and eliminate our ability to build these new schools. So it's just something to keep in mind. We haven't heard any of that. Mike and Heather and I have been doing this for a while, and we remember what happened last time. So we just want to keep that on the radar. Facilities projects, this includes the facility renewal projects that were funded with the sales tax. So this is all the large deferred maintenance projects that are dealing with roofs and air conditioners and parking lots and lights. Other facility projects picks up some more deferred maintenance, but also all the ongoing maintenance and other non-construction projects, minor projects, air conditioning, roof. There's some money for site acquisition. There's not any new money coming in. It's just money rolled forward. There's no immediate plans for purchasing land. I wanted to point out there was money in the budget. It was a line item for leasing facilities. We plan to spend $500,000 a year to lease space specifically for Sable Palm and South Intensive. However, we've made a lot of updates and fix these schools so that leasing is no longer needed. So we've taken that out of the budget. 1.5 million had accrued to date and $500,000 a year for the rest of the sales tax. It's not sales tax money, but it was on the referendum list. So this is another line item that we pulled out of the budget to help finance all the computers that we're buying. And then moving on to security projects, there's $30 million for single point of entry, other security projects, and added technology to ensure we have that safe environment that's so important. School buses, support vehicles is all the vehicles used by our maintenance and school police, all those vehicles that we purchased. There's some equipment for transportation, maintenance, and contractor transportation is all funded here. And then equipment is various types of furniture and equipment projects, including the musical instruments and maintenance of equipment. And moving on to technology, and then I'll pause. We have education technology. This is funded from the sales tax. It is the interactive flat panels. We have expedited some of that. We've moved it up from FY22 and 23 to get it all into 21. We want to get that technology into the classrooms as soon as possible. It will help with distance learning. So that was moved up. And then the technology line is significantly larger than in the past. 22 million is set aside for those 82 Chromebooks that we need to get to the 1-to-1 ratio. There's also a $16 million spent to replace computers that will exceed the useful life. That useful life is 5 years. It's written in statute. We can't replace computers sooner than that. But that's something you will see this number continue to rise. As we have more computers, we'll be spending more on an annual basis to replace them. And then the other technology, this is cyber and network security and infrastructure. It's switches and routers and all the mechanics behind the scene to keep all of our IT systems working. It includes PeopleSoft and the SIS, all the programs needed to operate the school district. And I'll stop there just in case there's questions.
There is Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. Going back to school buses, when we finally get back to school, whenever that might be, can you tell me about this 24.2 million as we look at spacing to transport our children from all across the county? Our bus supply that we have now, will we have to order more new buses as we look at making sure that our kids are safe? Because many of them are transported by bus. Can you tell me about this 24.2 million? Is that going to take care of us when we finally do get back to school?
At this point, this budget is based on the planned purchase of school buses. I've not heard of a need to expedite those at this point. I think there's still a lot of work being done with transportation. So we may need to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I've got a question for Ms. Evans. On the next slide that you were on, go to the next one. The classroom technology, my understanding was that all of the elementary schools and middle schools would have an interactive flat panel by the beginning of this coming school year, because I was hopeful that those cameras on those interactive flat panels would be used for our teachers to teach the distance learning. So are you telling me that that's not the case, that we're not going to have an interactive flat panel in every one of our elementary and middle school classrooms until 2022?
No, hi, this is Mike. Mr. Barbieri, that is the plan. And the team, the ed technology team has a big role in that, which is Adam Miller, and he works for Mark Howard, Dr. Sheffield. But I touched base with them just recently. We have a vendor we're working with, and that is their goal, and they are really working hard to try to make that happen and to get through our elementary and middle schools, and then they're going to quickly turn their attention to high schools. So we can follow up with the board with a current status update, but they are trying to get through all the elementary and middle. A lot of them have been done already. This project's been underway for a couple of years, but they are trying to move as fast as possible. And the vendor that we work with on those smart panels has stepped up as well.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Mrs. Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you for the other technology and technology in general. I'm so happy to see that we're going to have one-to-one computer for students for the ratio for FY21. But what about all of these children that do not, and these families that do not have internet access? This money in here that we're talking about, how is that going to help us? Because we may not be going to school anytime soon, and we may be doing distance learning. How are we going to take care of the children now that they have Chromebooks and computers? How are they going to be able to access the internet? What about this money? Is that going to help us?
So this money is really spoken for kind of existing projects and maintaining our systems. You raise a very good point. That we know we have students that had trouble getting access, and if the team is working on different ways. We're working with the county. The county has put $10 million aside to bring Wi-Fi into certain communities, but that's not going to solve our whole problem. We've done, on a small scale, we have a pilot out in the Glades handing out hotspots to students. But this is an issue that we still need to work on, and we'll probably have to come back to the board and allocate additional money to this. We potentially could use some of the CARES Act money for this if needed, or if we can get any outside donations. But we've got a little more work to do on that issue, and I just wanted to be clear that this does not solve that problem. This is really just maintaining what we have, getting the additional devices, the 82,000 Chromebooks, keeping the smart panel project moving as quick as we can, and then we're still going to have to tackle this issue of access for all students and how we address that.
Go ahead, Mrs. Henry.
Thank you. And just to follow up with our buses, I know some districts are using buses as hotspots to help with this situation. I don't think we did that this year. Is that something that we're going to be looking into, since we really know that and thank you for the hotspots for the Glades. I saw them and I was very pleased with that. But I just know that there's still so many children and families that can't connect to the internet. And one way many districts have used is the hotspot by using the buses. Is that something that we're going to add into our program so that we can make sure that people have access?
We're looking at that. We are. I know we're committed to outfitting 50 school buses with the Wi-Fi. I'm not sure that's the most cost-effective or the best way to get Wi-Fi to our students. There might be more efficient means than having a bus driver drive a bus and park it in some location and light up that. There's a limited area that you're going to serve by. The signal's only going to go so far from the school bus. So I think that's something we look at. It's in the toolbox, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we come up with something that might be more effective and more cost effective and have a broader reach than parking our buses at select locations. But we haven't ruled it out.
Ms. Brill, go ahead.
Thank you. And I was going to bring this up later, but for Mr. Burke, as you're looking at access for families, I know that we have the very basic need for making sure the infrastructure exists. But one of the concerns I've received from parents the last few days for distance learning is that in a lot of the homes, that do have Wi-Fi. If you have a parent at home who's working from home and you have multiple children working on distance learning, they don't have the speed or the bandwidth. I don't know exactly what the proper term is. And so some of them get kicked off constantly. And I don't know if there's a way to work with Comcast to somehow help these families, because they can't afford to contract for a higher level of service. And if their children are learning at home, they're also struggling in making sure the kids can stay on the computer. So I just want to put that out there and put that on your radar.
Thank you. It's a good point. So yeah, there's really, I guess, a couple issues there. Access itself, and then the level or speed of the access and the capacity at homes. That's something we have not even really navigated yet. But you're right. That would just add to the challenge.
Mrs. McQuinn, I just have a message for you. So when I turn my microphone on and off, a big white bar shows up underneath my screen, and it blocks out most of you. So if you want to speak, would you raise your hand high until I tell you I can see you again full time? Because right now all I can see is the top of your head and your staircase. So if you want to speak, I'm going to have to see a hand high enough to comes into my view. Okay, got it. Go ahead, Ms. Evans.
Okay. The next section, we've lumped some items in here, other capital items. The first one is property and flood insurance. And I wanted to bring this up because we spent $10 million last year. We expect it will be $12.4 million. And that's based on what we're seeing for the cost of insurance throughout the world, really, and based on market conditions. So the money is in the budget at $12.4 million, and that would certainly come back to the board to be approved before we award the contract. But just giving you a heads up that increase is there. The reserves of $86 million, that includes the sales tax reserve, and any extra money that we find between now and the end of the year. As Ms. Knust mentioned, we're in the process of closing out. Those dollars are going to be set aside for reserves for future years. We're still working on balancing the FY22 through 30. So if we get any extra money, projects are being closed out. We're closing out purchase orders as projects are completed. We're setting those aside to help fund FY22 and on. And then the last piece is charter schools. We have $12 million in the budget. That is funded by the state. So the final number for charter schools may go up or down. We're still waiting for the state to tell us what that number is, but it's fully funded by the state this year. So as I mentioned, the budget is balanced. The complete 10-year plan is under development. We're close to finished. We still have a little bit of work to do. We'll be bringing that back to you in August. The concerns, these are the same ones I presented to you last year. Legislative challenges. I think we're good with cost per student station right now, but if the state were to change that, that would be an issue. DOE approval for projects at this point, that's not required. So that's something else that we're monitoring. If they turn that back on, it would create some issues. Funding of charter schools. Right now we have FY21 is funded by the state. We don't have that assurance for FY22 through 30. So we have it in the budget that we're funding it. And each year we update that based on what the results are from the legislative session. We're monitoring the needs for maintenance, staffing, services, preventive maintenance. We want to make sure we get caught up on that backlog and don't create another. And that's certainly challenging. Construction costs for materials have been rising. We're monitoring to see how that's impacted by the recession. If we start to see prices come down, we've seen some labor costs come down, and we've seen cost of materials go up because a lot of it comes from outside the U.S. So far, I'm not seeing a big change overall, but it's something we're monitoring.
Ms. Evans, I have a question for you before you leave this slide.
Sure.
So you say, I understand now FDOE approval is not required for projects, but we have several schools on the capital plan for future construction. So is there a way to lock those in so that if FDOE changes its position, we not have to go back to them and get approval on those schools that we've got on the plan?
We'd have to have contracts in place. We'd have to go ahead and award contracts. So in order to do that, you'd have to take the projects that are in FY22 through 30 and move them all into FY21 and award contracts on them. One of the challenges there, and I'm speaking for Ms. Paul here, and she'll correct me if I'm wrong, but just the volume of work that's funneling through facilities right now is going to make it very hard to expedite all those other construction projects, but it's something we can certainly look at. In
areas where we need new schools, we probably should do whatever we can to try and lock that in, because, the Florida Department of Education could, it's likely that once they figure out we have these schools on our capital plan, that they may do something to keep us from being able to build those. So in those areas where we certainly have overcrowded schools, we need to make sure we try and protect that as much as we can.
I just went back to the list of schools, and just to summarize, we do have a contract in place for 05C, for 000, and 17 PP. The other 3 schools are further out in the plan, and I don't think that, and this is not my area of expertise, so I'm speaking out of turn, but I don't think the schools are needed just yet. We project they're going to be needed in the future. But at this point, that's why they're further out in the capital plan. But the current projects, we all have contracts in place. So they would be
if I may respond, this is Wanda Paul. So we prioritized it based on the ones that we needed first. And so when you look at, and Ms. Evans was correct, when you look at the Westlake acreage area, there's no need at this point right now, but there is a prediction that they will be needed before we, in this plan. So that's why they're there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and just the last point is that the vast majority of our capital plan is sales tax, and that is dedicated to dealing with the deferred maintenance. We continue to report on that to the Sales Tax Oversight Committee, and they're monitoring the use of the sales tax money on a regular basis. And with that, these are just the next steps. I'm not sure if Mr. Burke, if you want to cover the next steps.
Sure. Yes, I'll just close this out. We're still sticking to our plan. We have an ongoing hiring freeze on our department personnel. There is a waiver process. The schools have resumed hiring, but we continue wherever we can save money and put it aside for what we still anticipate at some point, some type of budget reduction related to this pandemic and the recession. We're preparing for that. We are applying for our CARES Act funds. We've gotten new guidance from FDOE just earlier this week on Monday. So we're adjusting our application based on that guidance. And again, we're just trying to position the district to be in the best position to withstand a revenue shortfall. And the other thing I just wanted to mention real quick was the governor's executive order that came out this week. There was a part of that, a big budget component that was very positive. I know there's a lot of concerns with some of the other parts about when we open schools or how we do that. But one positive thing in there was that they've said they're going to basically hold districts harmless on our enrollment for this fall, and that our October FT survey will be funded based on the projected enrollments should we have a drop in students. And that was applied to both regular student enrollment and student transportation FTE. So if that holds true, and based on our plan, our revenue should be stabilized at least for like the first half of the school year. And I was very happy to see that because we're hopeful our enrollment will hold here in Palm Beach County, but that is a concern across the country that we're just going to see students, and families go other directions. So that's very good. And then we'll still have to just watch and see, if the state, if they're able to get through FY21 without a special session to cut the budget or not. But we feel like we've done the best we can with the information available. The budget is balanced. We've got this reserve we continue to build to try to deal with whatever challenges are thrown the board's way. And, we're ready to take on any questions. I think the last slide, Ms. Evans, is just a reminder of the calendar. So we'll be advertising the budget on July 22nd. We'll bring the advertisements to the board for your approval, run them in the paper. We hold our first public hearing on July 29th. Then we have some time if we have to adjust the budget, make any final changes. We can do that before September 9th when we'll ask the board to adopt a final budget for next school year. And that's really our presentation for today. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Mrs. Andrews, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Burke. Great work. The CARES Act funds, I assume our Florida state has actually done the application, and we're drawing down, according to Leanne, and getting these funds of $37.5 million that's coming our way to Palm Beach County. Some of that money goes to charter and private schools. Could you talk with me about how that works?
Yes, so the total allocation for Palm Beach County was about $39.5 million. You're absolutely right. A share of that will go to charter schools and private schools. And we expect our remaining share for our district operating schools is about $33.5 million. And so that's going to be our share we hang on to. And our plan is to use that to shore up the general fund budget and take advantage of the grant to maybe further build our reserve, and also to cover any critical costs related to COVID-19 and as we reopen the schools. You're going to see in your next workshop, there's a slide or two from 2 slides from the finance folks. We're trying to be very smart about this. We've got different pots of money to work with, right? The board has their capital budget. You've got your operating budget. We have FEMA, potential FEMA reimbursement that we can claim. So we've already started a claim with FEMA, and anything like in the way of PPE that we can charge to FEMA, we want to take advantage of that before we spend either general fund dollars or CARES Act dollars. So we're just trying to, utilize the funds that are available and make the best fit, make the best match. So at the end of the day, the board has the most flexibility, and that we hang on to as much money as we can, basically, for the what we think is an inevitable budget cut at some point.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Mrs. Andrews, Mrs. Whitfield, and then Mr. Shaw.
Just to follow up, just for the public too, and Mr. Burke, I know you're working on it. The money that's coming from the heroes, that fund that was passed by Congress is, that piece is still sitting in the Senate. And there's a big portion of that that's coming to the municipalities and the cities. But I think there's a piece of that money, if it passes the Senate, will come to education. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, we're monitoring that. As you said, the HEROES Act, it was passed by the House of Representatives. It has not been taken up by the Senate yet. Congress really hasn't, everyone's expecting another round of stimulus at some point. The stimulus to date for K-12 education has been relatively a small share. And I think we showed that in one of our previous workshops. There was $13.5 billion for K-12 schools across the country in the stimulus approved to date. And when you looked at the ERA funds back in the Great Recession, there was $100 billion. The Council of Great City Schools had recommended a $200 billion stimulus package for K-12 schools. That's what they felt would truly be needed to get us through the next couple of years. The HEROES Act, I believe, would provide about another $60 billion for K-12 schools, and there may be some other little pots here and there. I expect that to change. I think, if once the Senate gets engaged in the conversation, there's different proposals floating around, and we'll just have to watch that closely. But hopefully, we will benefit at some point from another round of stimulus. But I don't have any hard information right now.
So my understanding from the board clerk is that Dr. Robinson is she's raising her hand. I don't see Dr. Robinson on my screen. So Dr. Robinson, I don't know how long your hand's up. Mr. Whitfield, if you wouldn't mind. Dr. Robinson, you want to go first if you are there somewhere?
No, I'm here, but I can wait until the people you named earlier speak.
Okay, Mrs. Whitfield, you're next, and then Mr. Shaw.
Thank you so much. First of all, Mr. Burke, I just want to compliment you on getting through this budget and managing to balance it with your team. I know you guys are amazing, and we're going to be asking a lot of you coming up here in the next year. So I hope you can hold it together and keep doing this wonderful work. The questions I have on the capital project slide, you said that there's a few that are italicized, and those are the referendum projects, and then some that are not italicized and not bolded. And I was just wondering, were those existing projects from before? Is that why they don't get either one? I was trying to guess what that means.
When the sales tax happened back in, we built that budget in 2006 and 7, and some projects have been added since then. So, for example, the Adult Education Center, that's funded from adult ed money. So it wasn't funded from the sales tax. So it wasn't on the referendum project list.
But it's not brand new.
Bold just means it's brand new to this year. You didn't see it last year.
Okay, that makes sense. One of the things I was thinking about with this slide, as we're going forward and we continue to present this to the public, it might be nice to see all the projects that have been completed, since we have some of those projects that have actually been done since the since the beginning of the capital plan and all the referendum dollars that we got from the public. So just a recommendation. And then I saw in there was a plan for buying 82,000 computers so we could have a 1-to-1 ratio. The one thing I was curious about is if every student who gets a Chromebook, are they going to be expected, if we start school again, to come back and bring it with them every day? Because I know some of these Chromebooks were used in the classroom previously. So are we going to have enough to have a classroom set still? Or will they have to travel back and forth with one?
The plan right now, this is going to be one computer per student, so they would need to bring it back and forth. If they're in school all the time and they don't need to take it home, they might be able to leave it at school. I know the specific mechanics about how the computers will be coming in and out of the school is still being discussed with the academic team and leadership as to how we're going to walk the computers in and out, but it's one computer per child. We don't have enough money to have classroom sets and 1-to-1 at this point.
And does it include us keeping the Chromebooks that we currently have distributed to students as that being theirs, or would they get a new one?
It will depend on the age of the unit. So every year, the computers that are 5 years old would come back in and we would replace them with a new one.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Mr. Shaw and then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Going back to your FEMA issue, three parts. The first one is, what kind of timeline do we look at now for FEMA to actually do these reimbursements? The second part is, what kinds of things can we be reimbursed from FEMA for? And thirdly, how do you coordinate the plans for these reserves and everything, knowing that we are now into hurricane season and may be impacted by both issues?
Okay, so first, FEMA, it can take a long time to get the money back from FEMA. I think we're still working on Hurricane Irma, and so it can take several years. But that's okay. We're accustomed to that. So a lot of these purchases right now are being made out of the general fund, and when the FEMA dollars come in, we'll reimburse ourselves. And to what FEMA will pay for, really they're paying for the PPE type stuff, the protective measures, and some of the things we're doing that are related to COVID-19 to protect our staff and students. So anything, we've started a claim, and with FEMA, there's a lot of regulations. You've got to, from the purchasing, the procurement, everything has to pass the requirements. So we're being, very mindful of that. And we've had this claim. We actually started it shortly after we closed our campuses back in March. So, it could be significant. I think we could probably approach about $2 million of different things items that may qualify. And we'll continue to pursue that, but we may not see that money. I don't know if they'll move faster than they do with a hurricane when it's a pandemic, or if we can expect the same type of there's a lot of, just red tape, for lack of a better word, that you kind of sort through when you're working with FEMA. And they're spread thin. They're working with districts across the state, and they've got their other emergencies. So I hope that's the first two questions. And then as far as our reserves, you heard Ms. Canoe say, look, we want to keep the board's contingency reserve, go ahead and maintain it at 3%. So we've got $60-some million that'll be in the board contingency reserve in the operating budget. And then, Ms. Evans within her capital budget pointed out that she's got some level reserves. I believe it was about $86 million or so. Those are reserves that we could tap in an extreme emergency. If needed, and we would of course come back to the board before we would take that type of action. And hurricane season, we're just hoping we're dealing with everything else right now. I guess I don't want to jinx us, but we're prepared for that. We update our manual every year. We actually have a meeting scheduled next week with our principals and the shelters, and I know there's a lot of consideration going into what that might look like, with the social distancing.
Mr. Burke, I thought we agreed not to talk about hurricanes right now.
I think you're wise to cut me off there. Yes, thanks.
All right, Dr. Robinson?
Okay, thank you. So I have a list of disjointed questions. So the first thing is with regards to the core spaces, and thank you for answering all my questions, but would you just send a follow-up with exactly which schools we're talking about and which core spaces we're addressing there?
Yes.
And okay, thank you. And then, so I noticed the increased dollars for custodial equipment. Thank you for that. I just wondered, does that include soap?
No, the soap would be purchased out of the operating budget. The capital
Okay.
budget is paying for things like the floor scrubbers and the equipment that's used.
Okay, the non, what's the word I'm looking for? The things that remain, the
Right. The
capital
consumable
items. Okay,
consumable items belong in the operating budget. Everything in the capital budget has to have a useful life of at least 5 years.
there we go. So, but you do have a significant increase in the dollar amount for soap in the budget,
We
even if
do.
it's on the operating side. Okay.
In fact, it's on the operating side, but the purchasing department has already loaded up supplies in our warehouse. We've already, even before the last school year ended, we were shipping out those supplies to the schools. So things like paper towels, hand soap, toilet paper, all that stuff we've kind of loaded up on. And we know we're going to burn through it much faster than years past when we reopen.
Okay, and then just a couple things that are tangentially related to what you presented. So can we please make sure that in the bathrooms, when you hit the thing, that the water runs for 20 seconds? So you don't have to keep hitting it to wash your hands for 20 seconds?
Dr. Robinson, this is Wanda Paul. We had already adjusted that.
Oh, great.
It was a board question and we sent it to the whole board, I believe.
Okay, well, thank you, because I remember sending the question. I didn't remember sending the response. Seeing the response. So thank you for that. And then in terms of the computer refresh, that like that's fantastic that you reallocated those dollars. It looks like it's what, a $20 million increase?
Yes.
Can you just give us a follow-up and say where that came from? I heard pieces of it in the presentation. I saw pieces of it in the backup, but I don't think I added up to $20 million in my head. So I know it's a priority, and I'm all the way for that. I just would like to see what got cut in order to accommodate that. And then lastly, and I know this is not in your shop, but to the superintendent, can we please get an equity plan relative to the devices and internet access? Because I still do not understand if we're operating on a first come, first serve. We've had a lot of philanthropists that have really helped out in this time of crisis. And now I'm hearing that even though we've allocated the dollars for the additional Chromebooks, they're not going to all appear, by whatever the magic date will be. And so that means they'll be doled out incrementally. So the question is, who gets it first, right? So I would just like to see an equity plan in terms of who has the highest need to get the first batch of Chromebooks. And then also the hotspots, because we've had some hotspots, some donated, I know Quantum and others, and I think CSC put money on the table for hotspots. And I know that those were given out in an area of true need. But the question is, as these resources become available, thanks to many, many people, how do we pass them out? So in my head, the hotspots first would go to homeless children, right? But I'm not trying to decide that. I'm just saying, can we just outline a plan so that whoever the person is, and I still don't know who it is, who is saying, here's your hotspot, here's your Chromebook, whoever that is, that there is a thoughtful, equity-based plan to pass that out. And then also for the internet access, and then the point that Ms. Brill brought up in terms of the internet expanders or whatever they're called, how do we guide the people who are so helpful to do this in an equitable manner, right? To meet the needs of the children who have the least access first. I just want it thought out, right? Instead of, I don't want it catch as catch can. So anyway, thank you. I'm thrilled that the budget is balanced. I'm thrilled that we're not taking a financial hit at the moment. So, we could keep the lights on today and hopefully we could keep the lights on later. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Dr. Robinson, I'll follow up a lot of the pieces, I think, in order to create that equity approach. Mark Howard, Dr. Sheffield, and Mr. Oswald, I think they have all the pieces. We just need to formalize it, so I agree.
Ms. Brill, then Mrs. Andrews. Mrs. Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you. Going back to the replacement and modernization projects, two questions. First of all, it's going to be tough for our bus drivers. I mean, as we get back to school, those facilities are so poor, the spacing is so bad, and I don't know what's going to happen, but you're going to have to come up with a way for these people to sign in to get to their bus or get some portables over there, do something, because the way this thing is looking, that they're not going to get anything until 24 and 23, which are years to go from here. Something has to be done. These people in tight quarters doing the hard work, the heavy labor for our children, getting them back and forth to school. But as I look at these modernization projects, I don't see the West facility. And this was a big deal that we were hoping that we were going to get a new facility or something was going to happen. And I'm talking about the facility in Belgrade.
Hi, Ms. Andrews. This is Wanda Paul again. At this time, these are the projects that were approved previously. Currently, I don't believe there's any money set aside for the Belgrade West facility. But that's something perhaps we can look at as we complete these projects.
Yes, Ms. Paul, because it was truly discussed. At one while, we were looking at putting it behind West Tech over in that corner. Quite a bit of discussion has taken place about it, as well as not going that route, but actually remodeling and getting it taken care of. That's a facility where, as I said just a few minutes ago, it's in a bad place for the people. No place to sit, pretty poor bathroom conditions, and it was discussed that they would get something. So I don't see any money here, and it's a real deal. It's a real deal at all of these transportation facilities, but the West was spoken about, and now it's disappeared. Ms. Paul.
Again, Ms. Andrews, to my knowledge, from the time I've been here, I've not seen any money allocated for the West Belgrade facility, but we can definitely look into that. I've not seen it, but I can definitely consult my team and see if there's additional opportunities to improve that site.
Yeah, it was discussed, so maybe the money wasn't placed there and it's not there now, but it needs to be looked at. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. McQuinn, you've disappeared off my screen. I can only see 8 people at a time, and there's 3 administrators on the screen that are taking up space. So, Mrs. McQuinn, if you have a question, you can go ahead and answer it now. Ask it now.
Yeah, I don't have a question, and Mrs. Bass had asked me to turn my speaker on and off, which I did. So hopefully this can be resolved. No questions.
All right. Any board members have any questions? Mr. Burke and Mrs. Evans, are you finished with this presentation?
Yes, sir. We're finished.
Thank you very much for a job well done. I still don't understand how you can balance a $3.5 billion budget, but kudos to the both of you for being able to do that. So thank you very much. Mr. Superintendent, I believe you have some closing comments on this one.
Not on this one, sir. We're ready to move on to the next. I have some comments before the next workshop. Carol, or do I make those comments before we listen to the recordings?
Yes, please.
Okay. So at this time, obviously we have a lot to discuss. There's been a lot of changes, but as superintendent, I'm speaking for the entire school district when I say the health and well-being of our students and staff is the board and I's top priority. I'd also like to thank the hundreds of parents, guardians, teachers, and others who have opened your hearts to the district as public speakers and through many, many emails and phone calls. No matter what decisions the board makes in the best interest of our students and staff, I know many of you will not like all of our decisions, and some of you will actually suffer. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. I empathize with the parents who have implored us to reopen because they need to return to work and want to know what their children are, and want to know that their children are in a safe space, learning among their teachers and peers. I also sympathize with the many teachers and families who are fearful to return to brick and mortar. I wrestle with the reality of knowing that the decisions we make will impact our most fragile children. While we will commit every resource available to supporting our children with disabilities, our exceptional students, and our English language learners, there will probably be some gaps. I want you to know that we hear you. We are educators because we love children, and we are committed to them, and our commitment to them will not waver. But these are very, very tough decisions and very tough choices that the board and I have to make. Even before schools closed on March 13th, we have been laser focused on determining, defining, and fine-tuning the best methods to educate our students while ensuring their health and well-being amid COVID-19. Hundreds of hours have been and will continue to be invested in this process. In addition to the Health Advisory Committee that I formed and the Return to School Task Force you will hear from shortly, I continue to collaborate with federal, state, and community leaders, many other superintendents on a daily basis, business and community leaders, employees, and I've listened carefully to the concerns and suggestions from students, parents, teachers, and the dedicated school board, not to mention our spouses. And what exactly, how it should be, I can tell you this: we are all in this together. A process such as this demands tedious planning and discussion. It takes into account science, equity, emotional, and educational needs. Decisions must support a robust education plan for all children, including those with disabilities, again, our English language learners and high-achieving students, and every child. The process must also conform to all of the legal and financial guidelines that are being provided to us hourly. It is not a process that we can rush. Realizing this, I set a timeline months ago with important goals and benchmarks to be achieved on specific dates. We have not deviated from this timeline because to do so would be to make rush decisions amid a plethora of external factors that we cannot control. The Return to School Task Force will present reopening options today that have been studied and discussed for over 5 weeks. While some of the options may no longer be available because of the deteriorating conditions in our county, it is important to me that the board and the public see the planning process in its entirety. When you take time laying out and crafting plans and options, your information is thorough and thoughtful. What the school board and public will see today is a summary of guidance that should be used when making final reopening decisions, along with considerations related to social distancing and equity. The team will also share potential risks associated with each reopening option, as well as suggestions on how the district can potentially mitigate these risks. The information you will hear is based on situation, viability, practicality, feasibility, and sound logic, not information that is hurried and based on emotions during an ever-changing pandemic. As I mentioned in previous meetings, the next very important date on our timeline is 1 week from today, July 15th. That's when I will present my reopening recommendations to the board, and the board will adopt final reopening decisions. Let me be clear. I have mentioned this before, and it's important to repeat. None of the options you will hear today involve returning to school campuses full-time in the traditional sense as in the manner in which we left schools. What I mean by this, it is not an option in Palm Beach County where COVID-19 impact remains at phase 1 to mirror the reopening of school plans and processes that have occurred in years past. Another critical date in the timeline that we just received on Monday is July 31st. That is the date on which the district's reopening plans must be submitted to the Florida Department of Education. You recall that the DOE issued an emergency order on Monday regarding the reopening of schools in Florida. It should be noted that the executive order from the Florida Department of Education provides the district with flexibility to begin the 2020-2021 school year in accordance with recommendations from health officials that are based on the status of COVID-19 in Palm Beach County, and without the fear of losing FTE funding as we make decisions based on keeping our students and staff safe during this pandemic. It is also important to share that the district's Health Advisory Committee, which includes the director of our local health department and other health professionals and community leaders, stated emphatically on Monday that based on the current number of COVID cases in Palm Beach County, members could not recommend in-person instruction at this time. At my request, health officials are currently putting recommendations and guidance in writing. I will share that written documentation with the board and the Florida Department of Education for their review. Over the next week, as we continue to gauge the spread of COVID-19 in Palm Beach County, we will continue discussions with health officials. We will review the important feedback from board members today. We will continue to work with the staff, and we will do this while following the new guidance from the Florida Department of Education. And finally, as I stated at the beginning of my comments, the district remains committed to prioritizing the health, safety, and well-being of students and staff as final details concerning reopening plans become more clear. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Bass for our call-ins, and then we will turn it over to Larry Clausen for the presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent, I just want to advise the public that for the next 2 hours and 33 minutes, we will be playing the recordings that you've called in to us. So we will be here listening to you. So you can play, if you're planning on watching the workshop, it'll probably start somewhere around 6 o'clock, which is approximately 2 hours and 30 minutes from now. So Mr. Ramasar, if you want to start the recordings, please.